Hello and welcome to Research Methods. Today we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping and then we're going to talk about the premises behind your research design paper. The research design paper, after all, is what we're building to this entire semester, and everything we learn will be in service of that. And by creating your research design paper, I believe it will put you in good stead for completing the senior seminar and even some courses later on in your academic career. The first thing I would say right off is that I'm a little bit concerned because on August the 31st, you have due your academic journal paper. And I'm not sure that I really brought across the importance of making sure that you have a really good set of sources that you're going to then use to build your research design paper going forward. Remember, you can have anywhere between 2 and 7 sources, but one of those sources is going to be where you find the topic for your final paper. So if you're going and doing all of this research, you find a bunch of articles you like, but they're not related to a topic you like, then you're not really serving your purpose. It would be easy to get a 10, and it would be easy to get a 10 in such a way as to almost preclude having an enjoyable and successful rest of the semester. So make sure that the articles you find not only are successfully put in APSA style, but that one of them or more of them are possible topics that you want to write about going forward for the rest of the semester. Also, you should note that the mandatory meeting sign-up will be available now, and for a large extent, we're working on a first-come, first-served basis. So what you need to do is you need to go to the Discussions tab in D2L and look to make sure that you find a time that is both available and that nobody has already selected. If there are no times that that you are available and I am available, you better contact me sooner rather than later so that we can set up something, because you certainly don't want to get past September 11th, which is the deadline for the mandatory meetings, and then not be able to successfully complete the proposal, the paper proposal. I would also say that even though the video assignment allows you to choose 3 out of 5 of the videos to write your reaction paper about, I strongly recommend that the Popper versus Kuhn video is one of the ones you select. I think it will really set you in good stead for moving forward in the course after this, and you'll probably have the opportunity to write on that video in an upcoming midterm exam. We'll touch on some other things when we meet in class, right? The Monday class and the Wednesday class actually performed very differently. Or actually, I performed in them very differently. And so those of you who are in the Monday class, I will quickly go over talking about how to browse in JSTOR before we move on to the next topic. So let's talk a little bit about the empirical research paper. And so you might break that apart into its components, right? And I think most of you have written research papers in the past. However, I would argue that essentially every paper that you have written in the past, or a great majority of the papers you've written in the past, have not really utilized the concept of empirical research. Rather, you've looked more in the area of logical research, which is to say that you've looked at what other people have said in the past, and you've drawn a conclusion from that logically. You've deduced it. If we look at our wheel of science, you've looked at what's been written before, you come up with a statement that you're proposing to be true, and we rely on the logical basis of your argument in order to find whether we accept what you're saying is true or not. And that's better than just your stated opinion. It's better than my stated opinion. After all, whatever we claim, it might be true, it might not be true. It all depends on how much we respect you. And given my memory of working with great political scientists through the years, they all tend to have strong opinions, and it takes a lot of evidence to persuade them to move from that opinion to accept your premise. Now, you could just restate what they've always said in the past, but that's not creating more knowledge, right? It's one of those problems of deduction. One of the problems of deduction is that you never really learn more than what's already known. You might piece it together in a way that hasn't been looked at before, but ultimately everything that you go out and you find evidence for, if it's already in a paper, already in an article, your friend down the hall already knows it, what have you really created? You've spread knowledge, you've disseminated knowledge, but you haven't actually done any original research. And I think the purpose of what we're doing here today is we're increasing our knowledge. We're increasing the knowledge in the world. You are at this great moment in your academic careers where before they trained you how to be a learner. They trained you how to repeat back to them what is already known. Now you are going to become someone who creates knowledge, who creates information for the world. And that takes a moment or two. It takes a course or two. It maybe takes a career before you become truly good at it. And our first steps begin today. So it's not so bad to deduce a hypothesis given evidence. After all, the entire premise that Kuhn would point to you, right? The entire premise of the paradigm is that there's a set of accepted beliefs within your field, and you should learn what those are. After all, you're taking this one class, but you're also going to take many other courses before they're going to declare you enough of an expert in political science to give you a bachelor's degree. So we're not putting down the deduction, the learning of information and then synthesizing it into a coherent whole is worth a lot. In fact, it's worth so much that a bulk of our paper will be about it. And when we move forward, this will be our literature review. And I'm asking you this semester to find 18 sources. This isn't going to be a haphazard approach to logically deducing a hypothesis. Now, a hypothesis is an answer to a question. We look at theory and we say, given what we believe, given our system of beliefs and structure of our beliefs, what would we predict to be the answer to this particular research question? And after all, finding a good research question, a scientific research question, is one of the great things that, the moment that you have one that motivates you, your academic career can really flower. You can really enjoy the pursuit of the answer to that question. But in the meantime, that's why we're looking at the articles, is hopefully you're going to find a question. Maybe one of the articles is going to answer it in a way that you don't think is right. Maybe one of your articles answers it really well, and it causes you to ask yet another question. Well, coming up with a plausible answer to that question is what your literature review will be about. In a lot of ways, it's very much the research that you've always done until now, We're going to be a little more ambitious. We're not going to say, find 6 sources. And we're certainly not going to say, what does the Washington Post have to say? We're going to look at academic journals, and we're going to see what has been published in this area in political science in the past. Now, one of the main reasons why you need to find good evidence is because I'm really 2 different people to you. Now, I'm smiling, happy Coach Carl, Mentor Carl, the one who's going to help you through this course. I'm also tasked by the university to be the judge, to be Judge Carl. I almost say good versus evil, good Carl versus evil Carl, right? Judge Carl, he doesn't believe your insights. He doesn't care what your opinion is. It's his professional job to be completely skeptical of anything that you say or claim. He's skeptical of anything new. In fact, he thinks new began in September 1987 when he had to leave his hometown in Ohio and go to college. And he started learning all these newfangled things. And he wants evidence from people he respects to move past this professional skepticism, this scientific belief that nothing can be proven true. I often talk to the class about imagining walking through a dark alley late at night. And you're not sure, maybe there's dangerous people who are going to waylay you and take your knowledge or just beat you up because they don't accept it's true. And what do you need? You can view all of your citations. You can view all of the sources that you've looked at as those professional people standing behind you. So the skeptical, evil people who might say, well, what do you know? You're a sophomore in college. You say, well, you don't have to trust me. I'm a smart person. I'm a smart person who deserves an A. But you don't have to trust me. You can trust this scientist and this political scientist and this expert in the field. And they've all written things down, and they'll all stand behind me because I've correctly summarized their work. And you'll never know. You'll never know, because when you walk past that dark alley and you have 18 famous political scientists, you can picture they're all like The Rock and Vin Diesel and people like that. And they're all walking behind you, and the evil force that would have stepped out and criticized your work will just let you pass because you have 18 friends behind you. Now the other part of me is good Carl or Coach Carl, right? And he's not good because he doesn't think that evil Carl has a point. It's not that he's not skeptical, but he knows the criticism that an academic paper can fall under when too much of it relies on just the claims of a researcher. Your literature review is a defense of what you are going to claim to believe. And so, he'll say, you better have all of your ducks in a row, because he's looking out for you. And he wants you to be able to address any possible concern, fair or unfair, that might be brought forward by a skeptical reader of your work. And so he helps you because he suggests to you strong evidence. You're going to need 18 or more sources. Why? Not because that's not a lot. I know that's a lot. But it starts to look a lot like your bibliography, or in APSA style, we call it your references. They start to look a little bit like a professional paper. You're not doing a reference page that lists 3 articles. You'll have 18 that just cover academic sources from your literature review. You'll have a few more, 3 or so, that will cover the methods section of your paper. Maybe 1 or 2 for your introduction, where you talk about how important and in the news what you're interested in is, or maybe not. But to have over 20 sources, you look at some of these papers, and 30 or so is pretty par for the course. So you will be writing at a very high level. And I'm going to suggest to you that you don't push your premise too far. You should take everything one step beyond what is already known. Kuhn would in Lakatos would refer to this as small science. You're not trying something earth-shattering, paradigm shifting. Instead, you're making a claim that your research fits within current research and either forces the slight modification of the dominant paradigm, or at least the dominant theory, or that it confirms it largely. Now, all of this is just what you've done before, even though maybe you didn't realize it before. All of this is the most spectacular of all high school papers. All of this is the kind of high school paper that you write and you give it to somebody and they say, yes, we definitely need him or her at my university. But we're building on that. The empirical aspect. Remember, you've read about empirical research, and what is empirical research? It is taking observation, the real world, and using it to test hypotheses. It doesn't have to be numbers. You can interview 25 people, or you can interview 1 person. And you are creating a situation where you're making an observation about the world, depending on how you form your questions. Or you can do a large-scale study, and you can get quantitative data, and you can utilize something like regression analysis, and you can test hypotheses, and you can see whether there's support. Now, I said your literature review is mostly doing the work that's proposed by Kuhn, or at least you are building a framework where you're showing where your research fits into current research. What you're doing by adding the observational study, in large extent, fulfills the concerns of Popper. Remember, Popper's big goal for you is that you are going to create an empirical test of your hypothesis that is falsifiable. Popper doesn't believe that you can prove anything to be true. But all you're doing is you've made a claim. You've made a claim based on evidence that's consistent with what people have said in the past. And in a sense, what a hypothesis test is it's a bet. You're proposing a bet with all those who would doubt you. All those who would doubt you say, I think you're wrong, notwithstanding all of the evidence you've proposed. If all the evidence you proposed is true, how are you going to show me a real-world example where your hypothesis works? And so your hypothesis test is an opportunity. You say, well, I'm right, and because I'm right, this is what's going to happen. If the evidence from my test shows that I'm right, then not only do I have the research and logic on my side, I've also shown you an observation of where it's true. And the harder I make it on myself, the more evidence I've shown. If I say there's a 1 in 20 chance that I could be wrong, then that's great, but I 1 out of every 20 times you do the research, you will be wrong. Later, we'll talk about type 1 and type 2 errors. The more falsifiable you make it, the stronger support you will have if it's not falsified. If I come up with a proposal for how the world works and I say, well, do you still beat your wife? Well, I haven't proven anything no matter what the person says, right? If he says no, I'm going to say, well, when did you stop? And if he says yes, I'm going to say, aha, you should be sent to jail. That's not a falsifiable question. There's no correct answer there. If I were to say, if I were to make a claim that if this rocket fuel works, we'll go to outer space, then what do? Hopefully I launch a rocket without anybody in it, and I shoot that rocket into outer space. And if it falls short of outer space, then, there's a good chance that maybe my fuel didn't work. Water is probably not a good rocket fuel. It might be, I suppose, if you get the fusion going well enough. But it's not what they use. So anyway, my real point is that would be a great test of whether your rocket works, is let's launch it and see if it gets the capsule where it's supposed to be. We're going to talk about the concept of causality. How do we actually know that one thing causes another? It's a well-known internet fact that there's a correlation between the number of pirates in the world and global temperature. The number of pirates declined, I guess, as a proportion of all people in the world, as the temperature went up. If our biggest concern was piracy, this correlation would suggest that we need to burn more fossil fuels. However, it's also a well-known maxim that correlation is not the same as causality. We'll learn that it's part of it, but we will also learn that it's not all of it. In fact, we'll learn that one of the main parts of causality is to find a causal mechanism. When somebody tells you, well, this drug cures this disease, we might not be the experts who can figure out whether that's true or not, but one of the first questions we should say is, well, what is the mechanism? Right? A vaccine might cure a disease by keeping people from getting it because we learn that this is a particular disease that you can only get once. And so if we give you a vaccine which triggers the immune system in the same way as if you'd actually been sick, voila, we've cured a disease. On the other hand, if someone says, drink this flavored water and you won't get sick, you should say, well, why? And they'll say, because we've tested 20 people who didn't get sick after they drank it. We'll see. And so anyway, your literature review is really important, because in your literature review, you're going to show a causal mechanism, Usually it's going to be some theory that you're building on. You're going to make a good argument for why the effect that you're proposing, the hypothesis that you're proposing is true. But that's not everything yet. The other half of what we're learning how to do is how to test to make sure that it actually works the way we've reasoned it would work. Now, the nice part for you is that you don't actually have to perform that test, but coming up with the research design is our real goal in this class. All right, so anyway, I would make sure that I watch the PowerPoint presentation. I'd make sure that if I can, I'd come to class. We'll be answering questions and talking a little more about this subject matter. We must be at that exact perfect place in lighting where it doesn't know whether it wants to have the darkness or the light. I'm seeing that I'm flickering a little bit. All right, well, anyway, I wish you all well, and I will talk to you in class, or I will talk to you next week. Do not forget to sign up for the mandatory meeting.